Welcome to Velocity, the Vista Chamber podcast. I'm your host, Chamber CEO Rachel Beld, and it's my privilege to interview the movers, shakers, and change makers impacting the Vista community and beyond. Today's guest is someone I've known for a really long time and who has had a tremendous impact in Vista and in my life personally. Kevin Ham is the recently retired Director of Economic Development for the City of Vista. And after overseeing a steady period of growth in the city over the past 21 years, Kevin retired in December 2021. Kevin's been instrumental in expanding economic diversity in Vista, bringing new industries and jobs to the community. And I've had the privilege of knowing Kevin first as my boss and then a colleague and friend for 15 years. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to go back in time, hop in our time machine and go back 21 plus years ago and ask why Vista? Why did you end up, or how did you end up here in Vista?
So in Coronado, I had worked there for several years in transportation and economic development. And there was a change in the executive staff and at the council level. So I had the opportunity to move on. And I had a call from the city manager at that time, Rita Gildert. And she said, I want you to come up and interview. So I came up and talked to her, several of the senior staff, and an organization that was called VITA, or the Vista Economic Development Association. So there were about 12 people that interviewed me, and the interview went well, and I ended up in Vista.
Wow, that's interesting. When you work in government, you always go in knowing there's a panel. But I'm sure walking into having 12 people, it was a panel of 12 all in one room, or was it a series of people?
So I interviewed for 3 people in the city, Rita, the assistant city manager and the director of HR. Mm-hmm. And then the organization, the Vista Economic Development Association, really wanted someone that worked well for them because the job at the time was also to manage that nonprofit agency.
Okay.
So since I had nonprofit experience and government experience, they thought I would fit well in the position, but both organizations wanted to interview me to see if the job was a fit.
Wow, that sounds pretty daunting. So obviously you did well in your interview and you landed the position and you've been with the city for 21 years. So I know you've learned a lot and you've done a lot and we want to dig into that. But I want to ask you, just at the core of being an economic developer, what do you think are the most important skills someone working in economic development should have?
The first of which is really having the ability to listen, to put yourself in the other person's shoes and see how you might be able to help them. I think being able to work in multiple systems and translate between languages of government and business. So in my past, I've worked in the nonprofit sector, the government sector. I've owned my own company, and I think all of those experiences really put me in a position to better understand what the needs were of the business community, of the city itself, and really facilitate a solution. So I think at the core, it's really having a positive attitude, a can-do attitude, someone that's a team player, but really taking the time to listen to see if you can help.
Mm-hmm. If somebody was listening today and they were interested in working in economic development, what education path or what career steps do you think they should take in order to be successful?
Depends where they are in their career. If it's someone just starting out in college, I might take business courses because I think that prepares you, or public administration. But at some point, I think that you really need to dive into the business community, whether that's taking a course through the California Association of Local Economic Development, which they have a 1-week course, which is an intro to economic development. Picking up materials. Some colleges these days actually have courses in economic development. So taking those courses to see if, in fact, it fits your skill set. I think many people in this industry are multitaskers. They have ADHD. They're used to looking at different squirrels, but balancing all the plates at the same time. So you have to really enjoy multiple complex issues coming your way and trying to balance them all at the same time and keep them moving forward.
I think some people would look at all of the challenges, like you said, the plates in the air, and say, whoa, that's really overwhelming. That's not for me, right? There are people who would maybe be stressed or overwhelmed by all the things that come at economic developers. But then someone who maybe would succeed in that role would be somebody who looks at that and says, okay, what next, right? And just can take all of those things and roll with it. So I think those are good things that you pointed out.
Well, you and I, in the City of Vista, took the Strength Finders course.
Right.
Yeah. And so we were outliers. And I think in a city, especially in economic development, you have to understand that you are an outlier and how your skill sets can be beneficial to all the other departments. But you're right.
Okay, so you have a semi-famous quote that's get them, help them, keep them jobs. And so why do you think that this phrase sums up economic development so succinctly?
Well, early on in my career, I understood that it was important to convey complex or long thoughts in an elevator speech. So I wanted to be able to translate to my children when they wondered what the heck I did as a job, when I was talking to family members, but most importantly, to people who were new to economic development, whether it was city staff, new elected officials, or people I might run into. So I think get the companies, keep the companies, help the companies, and then at the end of the day, you're really helping create jobs. And I think as people think of that phrase, it really helps encapsulate what we do in economic development.
So even though, you've retired officially from the city, I know you're still helping out there a bit. I know you're not done working in economic development. So I'm going to ask this in the present tense. So what's the best part of the work that you do?
Helping people. I was thinking about it the other day. I was listening to an economist talk about a book that he has written and the impact that it's had on the world. And I realized that in economic development, we are really helping people. And my father owned his own company. And I realized part of my interest, my desire to help out others was seeing the challenges that maybe my father had as an independent businessman. He was a great graphic artist, but not the best at collections. Maybe needed to learn a little bit in other areas. And so as I work with businesses, whether they're big or small, all of them have a need. And trying to find that need that we might be able to help with really just gives me passion.
When you say you want to help a business, what's something specific that comes to mind? I know you've had lots of years of helping companies and a million examples come to mind. Is there something that jumps to the forefront of your mind as an example of something you're really proud of how you help somebody?
Well, I think the craft brew industry is a really good example.
Yeah.
Where we took the time to listen. This was a manufacturing use that just happened to produce something that was different than a widget. And it was new at the time. And bringing that information in, listening to what their need was, which was a location to manufacture the product, but also having a tasting room that helped support their operations. Each company is different. And when I go back to that one core that I talk about, which is taking the time to listen, listening to that company to see what that need might be. So it might be clear to them, or they think it might be clear to them, because they might come in actually thinking, well, what I need is new staff. But it might not be new or additional staff. It might be staff, might be part of it, but they might need training for their existing staff. Or it might be a new manufacturing facility that might have some high-tech aspects to it. So I think helping discern, distill, and define what that company needs is an important piece at the front. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the brewing industry because on a previous episode, I had Mayor Ritter on the podcast, and she and I talked a bit about the council's role in adapting to allow the brewery uses. And so from a staff perspective, what were some of the things that had to happen in order to allow the brewery uses to continue? So, I mean, obviously the council had to change policies and look at that, but at the staff level, like what were the nuts and bolts that happened at the staff level to kind of spur that activity?
You bet. Well, many times in economic development, people throw our way the unconventional ideas, or those unconventional ideas come our way. So if we listen to those ideas and see where they might fit, and if in fact, for example, in that instance, I thought that it would be a great addition to the business park. We had just finished what was called our base industry analysis, which was the first strategic plan that we did in the City of Vista. And one of the aspects of the plan was to look at biotech. I was creative enough, and people held their breath long enough to trust me to say, well, this was really biotech. Mm-hmm. And we worked our way through the process, and we were able to get the first and second, third brewery into the community. There had already been one here in downtown Vista, but there was also one in the business park that had been established before people really started paying attention. Mm-hmm. That was Green Flash. And working with them and the city, balancing between the two needs of the business to move forward with competition, what those changes might be, while at the same time trying to work with the city and the concerns that they might have, which was law enforcement. So one of the things that I thought was important as we started having more and more breweries was to create something called the Vista Brewers Guild. Mm-hmm. And the Vista Brewers Guild was really an opportunity to talk to that industry as a whole, to hear what the main issue was that they needed us to work on, but at the same time, what our concerns were. And that forum really served us well as the industry blossomed, both on the brewing side and on the city side, because it created a single voice that we could work with. Mm-hmm. And an opportunity to really deconstruct the thoughts and challenges that we thought we had or we did have, and the same for them.
That's great. So why do you think that the craft beer industry is connected with consumers so deeply? I mean, obviously there's a demand, or else we wouldn't have, I think we're at 20 per?
Well, I call it 20 plus.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that there are some breweries that have 2 locations.
Okay.
So technically that's 2 breweries, but it's really only 1 brand.
Okay. So 20 plus. So why do you think, obviously with so much competition and everyone is still here, so why do you think that that industry is connected with consumers so deeply?
I think especially as the industry started, mm-hmm. it was really about something authentic. So even more now, people look for those authentic opportunities. And so at the time, there were national brands. And you had these breweries starting up in business parks in unique locations that maybe generations like mine and yours would, when we were younger, go to a party, mm-hmm. In the back of this warehouse. These breweries started up in a very unique place mm-hmm. that created some authenticity. And the beer itself was very unique and different at each of the different breweries. Mm-hmm. And so I think it resonated with individuals that wanted something that was different. Yeah, I think you're right. And also just in Vista specifically, we have this community of makers. We have this environment where people make things, food and beverages and art. And we have a business park where people make things. And so it's exciting to see the craft brew industry blossom in such a way over these past years, and to just deepen that culture, that maker culture that we have here. So yeah, thank you for that. So speaking of the business park, so many people in our community don't know about the economic engine that is in the Vista Business Park. Can you explain why the Vista Business Park is so important to our community and really our region? The jobs.
Yeah.
It brings in a little bit of sales tax and property tax. But in the business park, there are 900 plus national and international companies that produce products that are sold across the globe. And they have over 21,000 employees in the city of Vista. So, for example, in the city of Vista, in round numbers, we have about 45,000 people who live in the city that work outside of the city or in the city. And then we have about 45,000 jobs here. About half of those jobs reside in the business park. And these are everything from high-tech manufacturing to corporate headquarters to executive positions to management positions mm-hmm. to line workers. Mm-hmm. And so there are a whole host of jobs that people can apply for. And in the city of Vista, it's a great opportunity to have this employment resource right in our backyard. But also there's 14 million square feet. Those 900 companies occupy 14 million square feet in the Vista Business Park. And that is a significant amount of property specifically dedicated to those companies in North County and the support of those jobs.
Do you know, how does that compare to some of our neighboring communities as far as square feet and number of companies in a designated area like that?
So in square feet, I would say Carlsbad is probably close to about 15 million square feet now.
Okay.
San Marcos is probably around 3.5 million square feet in the business park areas that they have. And Escondido, I'm guessing, is probably around 6 million square feet. So you can see the impact that we've had. And for many years, we had the most amount of space. It wasn't until recently that Carlsbad passed us up with some of the more recent developments that they've had. So it's been a significant employment area for North County as a whole.
So I want to shift to talk a little bit about COVID and COVID recovery. So I know the city has a number of programs to support businesses, and I'll link to those in the show notes so people can find them. But are there any that you specifically want to talk about, or any that are particularly of interest that you think people really need to know about?
Well, COVID, there are many different parts of COVID.
So
right?
many.
So there was the early response in day 2, where we stood up a website to help people understand where they could go to get food in the city of Vista. Halfway through the pandemic, we put in place some economic recovery plans through our Vista Economic Development Strategy Committee that supported that. But the most recent ones are through ARPA funds through the federal government. And I think there are a couple that are very important. One is the $2.7 million grant program that we're managing, or working with the chamber on to manage that grant program, which is very important for our businesses. So I want to say thank you for the partnership and really getting out there and working with those businesses. So this is very, very important for our local businesses. Cybersecurity is becoming a big issue. And right now we have a program with the San Diego Cybersecurity Center, which also includes the FBI and MasterCard, where we're taking individuals through this program of education to help them understand where they might lie on the spectrum of being a risk. And so MasterCard, for the first time, will have a grade system of A through F that they'll work with this first cohort on to help them better understand where they might fall. We're not calling it a training program because we can't really train them, something that they have to understand on their own. It's really more of an education. But I think this will give them a yardstick by which they can better understand what they might need to do to protect themselves.
What size companies do you think are the best fit for that program?
I think it could be 1 employee to 50.
Okay.
You know, if there is a company that has more than 50 employees that wants to take advantage, they're more than welcome to do it. But I think those smaller companies that are under 50, you know, you have someone who's an HR director, an IT director, CEO of the company, and they're wearing many hats. And this just provides them that opportunity to get some additional information to better understand how they might be able to prepare themselves.
Great. I think that's going to be a great resource. Anything else you want to mention about the ARPA?
So we have a couple of programs with Strategies 360 for new entrepreneurs, which is a training program. So during the pandemic, individuals have had opportunities to move on from corporate America, whether it was through a choice of theirs or not a choice of theirs. And we have many new entrepreneurs right across the street in the downtown, right in the core of the downtown. We have a company called Moonray that just recently started. You know, they had a location close and they had an opportunity to start up here. So I think for entrepreneurs, we have a training program that would be beneficial to them. We're working with Cal State University San Marcos, a professor there, Strategies 360, to help train these entrepreneurs, to help educate them, to better understand their needs and equip them to run their company. And then we also have a mid-stage training program with Strategies 360. You know, the company might have, 25, 30 employees. It's been in existence for 4 or 5 years. And they need to understand, how do they transition from where they are? They might have a CEO that needs to give up part of the responsibility to someone else, or might need to bring someone else in to help with the accounting piece. And so this program is very important. Also with the Chamber of Commerce, we're working on 2 additional programs, which will really focus on Vista residents and Vista companies. The first of which is the skills assessment, if you will, a survey, an analysis to determine what are those skills that individuals need to have to really support our Vista companies, to help train them. Because in Vista, we have just about 100,000 residents. And right now, the unemployment rate is right around 4.6%. We really want to create those opportunities to help support those individuals that want to find a job, but also improve where they might be in life. And then the other is a internship program.
We're really excited about. Super excited about it.
It's great. And that program, as you know, will roll out to Vista companies in June. It will support juniors in our local high schools to really have them taste the flavor of what it's like to work for a specific type of company or a business, but at the same time provide support to our local businesses.
Yeah, we're really excited about it, and have some updates for that very soon. So excited about that. What do you think is next? What do you think's next for Vista? Anything exciting that you can share? I mean, I think people are excited. They see the craft brew industry, and that was such an amazing opportunity for Vista. And maybe something that large isn't quite right there, but what do you think could maybe be something that's next for Vista, either on a small or large scale?
Well, I will say you were part of the Vista Economic Development Strategy Committee.
Yes.
So that will give you a peek at the future. My goal was to, through the strategy development, to take a peek at the future, look around the corner and see what some of those issues might be. So this strategy is online. You can type in Vista Economic Development Strategy and you'll see it. So as someone that really likes to dig deep into this and see what policy changes might happen so you can help plan for the future and help businesses be successful and create jobs, I think there's a couple of things that are coming up. One, we need to look at the different corridors we have in the community. So we have revitalized our downtown. We're almost coming up on the 20th anniversary of Vista Village.
That's amazing to think about. It's crazy.
Yeah. So and if you think about it, our downtown really has kind of three distinct areas.
Yes.
So we improved the streets in downtown Vista, the historic area where Main Street is in Indiana. We then moved to really do a wholesale, complete redevelopment around the Wave Water Park with the creation of Vista Village. And then we essentially moved back to the historic downtown and reinvested our energy to really create a heart in our community where people could go, where they could hang out, where they could eat dinner, where they could have a locally brewed craft beer. And our downtown used to roll up the sidewalks, as you well know, just 7 years ago. And now things started the time the sidewalks rolled up last time, and they're busier before then as well. And then we also spent about $30 million as a city to make the public improvements along South Santa Fe in an area that we call Paseo Santa Fe. But I think to answer your question specifically, I think those corridors such as North Santa Fe, East Vista Way, looking at what we can do to inject the same type of energy, activity, and development in keeping with the neighborhood, in keeping with the community, so it has an authentic core, which is very, very important. And then I think the other big issue is what should we do as all of us shop online, as all of us use Amazon? How should we shop? Now that we have some of these older vacant retail buildings that are no longer needed or are used, or maybe even some office space, what should those become? There's some easy choices, but I'm hopeful for our community that we really take the time and a thoughtful approach at determining what should be in those boxes next. I think that's part of the edge that will keep us unique and that will help propel us into the future is what should we do with that and what can we do that's going to be unique and different than other locations?
Yeah, great. So I want to ask a couple of questions about collaboration with other cities and other communities. So I know that during your time in the City of Vista, that the Innovate 78 initiative began. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about how that started and kind of where that's going?
Oh, you bet. So I had tried twice before Innovate 78 started up to create a partnership with other cities. Prior to the partnership starting, each city worked in its own silo. And in my humble opinion, that really didn't benefit the residents and the businesses in our community. We shouldn't be fighting, in my opinion, over keeping a business in our specific community, we should do everything we can to keep them here. But I think as a region or a sub-region, these jobs, the 45,000 that I was talking about, they work in Oceanside, they work in Carlsbad, San Marcos, and Escondido. So Innovate 78 really was born of that idea to bring together the cities for the benefit of our residents and our businesses to really keep those jobs here. So on the third attempt, we finally had some changes amongst some of the different cities, and some cities didn't even have economic development staff. And there were two issues that were coming together at the same time. The mayors of those cities that I mentioned were meeting on transportation-related issues, and they really wanted to come together to have a holistic view and position that they could present to Sandag. Well, at the same time, I was talking to Kathy Dodson, who was the economic development director at that time and eventually became the interim city manager for Carlsbad, about how we might be able to work together. And so we married that idea of the mayors as well as the economic development staff working together. And that is how Innovate 78 was created. We wanted to come up with a name first. So we worked with a branding firm to come up with the name. And then since then, which has been about 7 years, we have worked together to keep jobs here, to keep companies here, keep them from fleeing the state and supporting them locally. And we have lots of examples, whether it's Dr. Bronner's that moved from Escondido to Vista, or whether it is Prana who moved from Vista to Carlsbad. Keeping that job local is so important.
Cool. And in your collaboration with these other communities, you've had the opportunity to work with the other economic development managers and directors. And I know you've been a leader in the state with regard to professional organizations for economic development. So you've been really a mentor to a lot of people in economic development. And so I'm curious, who were some mentors for you in your career?
My dad. I think when I started, there weren't as many examples or mentors in economic development. There are a few people that I worked with, Hank Cunningham, who worked in the city of San Diego, Kurt Chilcott, who used to work in the city of San Diego in economic development and has gone on to run other organizations. But I think working with CalEd to read all the materials we could. At the time I started in Coronado, I had no experience in economic development. And I had the skill sets. I trusted the city manager, Homer Bludow. He said I had the skill sets to do the job. And in Coronado, it's a very, their city employees are required to do a lot. And so I think what he saw was the customer service skill set that I had to discern what the issue was and to move forward in a thoughtful way. And so Homer Bludow was a mentor in the sense of government and what I needed to do and how I could work in that environment. But I really just took the time to read books, attend classes. At the time, San Diego State had a class called CECD, which is a certificate program run by a gentleman named Hal Brown. It was a 8-month certificate program, which really talked about traditional economic development was about bringing in a ballpark. But the certificate at San Diego State really focused on how do you impact the local individuals in a positive way. So there's lots of examples where people get displaced in economic development. And the CECD program at San Diego State really focused on how do you include them as part of the process. So I think early on in my career, with the individuals coming into the class and teaching in that certificate program, I understood how it's very important to include those individuals. So a bit of it bootstrapping and a bit of it listening to other people.
Yeah. Great. That's great. So on a personal note, I have personally seen you as a very dedicated, involved father to your kids. What have your kids taught you that you've used in your work?
More patience, more tolerance, even more that I'm not right all the time. Although we'd all hope to be more right than wrong. Realize that there's a lot of times that we're not right. That there are other things in life than work. My kids have really been great opportunities to help me really fully explore what it means to be fully human. And so it's been a great opportunity. And they are great adults.
That's awesome. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want people to know about your work in Vista or just about Vista as a community that you would want to share?
Well, first of all, is my partnership and friendship with you. It's been great working all these years with you. We've gone through a lot and we've done a lot.
Yes.
And there's been so many positive things. You were part of the economic development team and came up with some very great ideas that we were able to implement. So I want to make sure that the community knows that the city and the chamber have had a great partnership, but you and I have had a really great partnership. I think also in the city of Vista, it's important to know that we have an amazing city team, from the council to the city manager to the economic development staff. And I think one of the reasons that it's taken a while for them to find someone to fill the position that I've just left is that they want to find someone that really works in that team, that works with the city team and kind of connects. So I don't think there's a better city manager in the state of California. Patrick Johnson does a wonderful job. There's not a better community development director than John Conley. He knows what the rules are. He knows where the flexibility exists. He's great to work with. If you ask John, he'll say, Kevin's job is just to come in and tell me what I did to do. But this is not the case. It's really a partnership, working together to find the solution for businesses that also work for the city. Our public works director, our finance director, all of these individuals working together as a team really produce amazing services for the residents of Vista. And so I'd really like to commend the city team as well for what they do and how they do it.
That's great. That's great. Okay. So I always end my interviews with a couple of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And so the first one is, what is a book that you think everyone should read?
Strength Finders.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, you should have bet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree. Strength Finders is a great book. It's been a good tool. And for the folks listening who don't know what it is, we'll link it in the show notes, but it's basically a test where you can assess which of these 30, I think there's 30 something strengths, and which 5 are your top strengths that you want to maximize utilizing in your career and in your life. It's been really eye-opening to learn what my strengths were and to know that people on my team and people I work with, what their strengths were. So yeah, I think that's a good one. I knew you were going to say that.
Well, and I'm going to add to that. I'm going to add another book. I talked a little bit earlier about at the conference that I was just at, and there's a book called, I believe it's The Rainforest. And essentially it's talking about entrepreneurs and how entrepreneurs start. And that it's more like a rainforest. And, how these businesses kind of grow up through the rainforest and move up. And the gentleman that's written the book is well-versed in supporting that industry. And so I have not started to read it yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Tell me a song that is your jam, something you always turn up. It comes on the radio. You got to rock out.
Got to be something Goo Goo Dolls.
Goo Goo Dolls. Okay.
Goo Goo Dolls. Depeche Mode, maybe. I've never really won for any specific song, but those bands, I'm an 80s kid.
Okay.
Right. So these are my bands.
Okay.
So I can't think of one that comes to mind right now.
Okay. Tell me something that inspires you.
My kids.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful day.
Mm-hmm.
Conversation with a friend. Making a difference.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's great. And so I always ask folks as well to give me a business that they think deserves a shout out, but I'm not going to put you on the spot because you've worked so closely with so many businesses. I don't want you to get hate mail.
I have one though.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Okay. So tell me a Vista business that deserves a shout out.
Every business in Vista.
Oh, please. Okay, we'll end this on some cheese. Sounds good. Kevin, thank you so much for being here today. It was really nice chatting with you. And I wondered if I was going to learn something new, and I did. So thank you. Thanks for taking the time to sit down with me today. And thanks for all your work in Vista. I know our community is better because of your efforts and your collaboration and camaraderie with all of the partners. And so thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to Velocity, the Vista Chamber podcast. If you like what you heard, please tell a friend. Let's move Vista forward with Velocity. The Vista Chamber of Commerce is a nonprofit organization that serves as a catalyst for business growth. Check us out online at vistachamber.org.